Harold Benson stood in his own kitchen, a space he'd built with 40 years of sweat and quiet sacrifice. Across from him, Lydia, his daughter-in-law, met his steady eyes and said, "If you don't like living with us, you can leave." The words landed like a slap. 9 minutes later, she was on the phone, sobbing dramatically to 911, claiming Harold had lost his mind. But what Lydia didn't know was that the small recorder in Harold's shirt pocket had been running the whole time. Before that day turned his life upside down, Harold had lived a quiet, structured existence. He was 68, a retired high school principal whose days moved to a calm rhythm, coffee in his chipped navy mug, oatmeal with cinnamon, and a slow walk to the mailbox where his knees always reminded him of his old basketball coaching days. Harold lived in Brookfield Hills, in the same brick house he and his late wife Martha had bought decades earlier. She'd been gone for 2 years, but her presence still lingered in every creak of the floorboards and whisper of wind through the curtains. Sometimes, when he watered the geranium she loved, he'd murmur softly, "You'd laugh at how stubborn this one's being today." The house held more than furniture, it held their history. The banister where his son David used to race toy cars, the dent in the garage shelf from a clumsy snowblower mishap, the hallway where their old dog, Patch, once stood guard every night. Harold kept those scars and dents as reminders that a lived-in life was never perfect, but always real. Retirement, people said, was supposed to be peaceful. For Harold, it was a balance between silence and small routines, lists taped to the fridge, reminders to fix a hinge, buy groceries, and send birthday cards. He ironed shirts to look respectable at church and folded socks in pairs out of habit. His mother had raised him to value order. She'd worked nights, so he could have a used trombone for marching band. His father had left when Harold was 11, no note, no goodbye. That absence was the reason Harold worked so hard to give David the stability he never had. He remembered when he and Martha bought the house. They'd saved coins in a coffee can labeled house. When the mortgage was finally paid off, they burned the papers in the fireplace, Martha laughing and clapping as Harold kissed her forehead. Those were the moments he lived for. But after she passed, the silence that filled the home wasn't comforting. It was hollow. Still, he adapted. Tuesdays meant the library, Thursdays lawn care, Saturdays fixing something before it broke. That routine became his anchor, a defense against loneliness. Then came the call. "Dad, it's temporary," David had said, his voice uncertain. "They're downsizing at work. Lydia, and I just need a place for a little while." Harold didn't hesitate. His son sounded tired, and a father never stops wanting to protect his child. "Of course," Harold said. "The guest room's ready." They arrived that weekend with 2 suitcases and restless energy. Lydia hugged Harold with one arm while scrolling through her phone with the other. She called him Harold, never Dad. But Harold didn't mind. Not yet. At first, it wasn't bad. Lydia worked part-time at a salon and came home full of gossip. David sent out job applications and talked about interviews that never materialized. They watched basketball games together, shared takeout dinners, and for a few brief weeks, Harold almost felt like he had family again. But slowly, things began to shift. The pantry grew messy, packages piled by the door, and Lydia's expensive handbags didn't match her income. The thermostat stayed high, and lights burned all night. Harold's once quiet mornings turned into chaos. Still, he swallowed his frustration. "We help if we can," he told himself, echoing what Martha would have said. 9 months passed. The word temporary had become a cruel joke. One morning, Harold decided to speak up. Lydia stood in the kitchen, perfectly styled, scrolling her phone while Harold brewed his coffee. He cleared his throat. "We should talk about moving out. I can help with the first month's rent, but it's time to plan." Lydia didn't even look up. "We do contribute," she said flatly. "To what?" he asked. Her smirk appeared. "The vibe." Something in Harold cracked, quietly but deeply. "No," he said. "Rent. Utilities. Groceries. We need to be clear." Lydia finally met his gaze. "If you don't like living with us, you can leave." The words echoed through the kitchen. David sat silent, peeling the label off a bottle, unable to look his father in the eye. Harold nodded once, voice calm. All right. Then he walked upstairs, opened their closet, and began folding their clothes into a suitcase. Lydia's voice sliced through the quiet. What are you doing? Harold didn't look up. Packing. Not our things, she snapped. Yes, he said. Yours. David appeared, face pale. Dad, what's going on? Harold looked at his son, 42 years old, standing in socks Harold had bought, in a house Harold had built. You said temporary, David. That was 9 months ago. Lydia folded her arms. We do contribute. To what? Harold asked again. The vibe, she repeated. The room went silent. You've never paid a cent, Harold said. Lydia's voice turned sharp. If you don't like it, you can go. Harold's eyes hardened. You're right. If someone has to go, it won't be me. 10 minutes later, Lydia was crying into a phone, pretending to be frightened. When the police arrived, they weren't alone. 2 officers, a paramedic, and a silver-haired stranger stepped inside. Mr. Benson, the stranger said smoothly. I'm Dr. Anthony Shore, your psychiatrist. We've discussed your memory lapses. Harold froze. I've never seen you before. Lydia gasped dramatically. Dad, you don't remember? You saw him last month. The officers shifted uneasily. Harold answered every question clearly, date, year, president, even recited Shakespeare. Still, the so-called doctor pressed. Denial is common in cognitive decline, the man said. We need to take you for observation. The words chilled Harold's blood. This wasn't confusion, it was a setup. He steadied his breath. Then you won't mind if I call my attorney first. Lydia's expression faltered. Dad, there's no need for that. Harold met her eyes. There's every need. He dialed his lawyer. Thomas Lynn, he said. Get here. Now. That night, Harold couldn't sleep. The house felt foreign. His own walls seemed to watch him. Lydia's false tears replayed in his mind, her voice trembling for the police, calling him unstable. But the worst part wasn't her. It was David's silence. His son had said nothing. Around 3 a.m., Harold gave up on rest. He sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the refrigerator filled with groceries he'd bought. The quiet hurt more than any words. He remembered David as a boy, hugging him after long days. Thanks for working so hard, Dad, he'd whispered. Every sacrifice had felt worth it then. The long hours, the old car, the empty savings account. But now that same boy had stood silent while his wife tried to erase his father's dignity. The betrayal felt like frost inside Harold's chest. By the 3rd sleepless night, Harold stopped replaying and started planning. His anger cooled into something sharper. He began observing, noting every whisper and shift. Lydia rehearsed her tears in the mirror. David pretended to job hunt, but spent afternoons at diners. They thought he was too old to notice. They were wrong. He started collecting evidence, bills, receipts, and bank statements, stacking them neatly in a folder labeled Truth. Then he bought a small pocket recorder. The first time he used it, his heart raced. But when Lydia's voice hissed, "If you don't like living with us, you can leave," he knew he had what he needed. Still, one question burned. Who was the fake doctor? So Harold called Thomas again. Find out everything about Anthony Shore, he said. The next day, Thomas called back. His real name's Brian Keller. He's been involved in elder scams, fake doctors helping families get control of estates. Harold gripped the phone. It was real. They were trying to strip him of everything. After that, Harold locked his documents, changed his passwords, and installed small cameras around the house. Every dinner smile, every polite nod, he recorded it all. Lydia had no idea she was starring in her own undoing. When David asked, "Dad, are you feeling all right?" Harold smiled faintly. Never better. The plan was simple: patience. Let Lydia dig her own grave. Let her arrogance expose her. And one afternoon she did exactly that. It was a Sunday when she came waving one of Harold's bank statements. "Harold," she cooed, "I think it's time you let us help manage your finances. You've been overwhelmed." Her tone was syrup, but her eyes were cold. Harold set down his coffee, studying her. "You think I can't manage my money?" It's not about can't, Lydia said. It's about shouldn't. You need someone younger, reliable. Harold pressed record. Reliable, he repeated. Like the Cancun trip you charged to my card? Or the gaming console David bought? Lydia smiled. We're family. Families share. Families respect, Harold said. And respect isn't optional. Lydia's mask cracked. You're confused, Harold. Everyone can see it. You don't remember what you sign. That was the opening Harold had waited for. He reached into the drawer, pulled out the thick folder marked Truth, and dropped it on the table. These are lies, she hissed. Harold pressed play on the recorder. Her own voice filled the air. If you don't like living with us, you can leave. David's face went pale. Lydia, what is this? But Harold wasn't done. He set his phone beside the recorder. Thomas's voice came through the speaker. David, your wife's real name is Lydia Thompson. She's been married 3 times, all elderly men who died under suspicious circumstances. David stared at his phone, trembling. You told me you'd only been married once, he whispered. Lydia's face hardened. Fine, she snapped. Yes, I married them. Yes, they died. And yes, I was going to do the same to him. Silence choked the room. You drugged me, Harold said quietly. Didn't you? Lydia's smile returned, chilling. Every morning coffee, just enough to make you groggy. Just enough to get your signature. David staggered back, horrified. My God. Then came the knock. Firm, measured. Through the window, Harold saw the black SUVs. The FBI entered, calm and composed. Lydia Thompson, you're under arrest for elder fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Her scream echoed as they cuffed her. David stood frozen, his life collapsing. When the door shut behind the agents, the house was silent again. The good kind of silence. Harold sat at the table, breathing deeply. For the first time in months, peace didn't feel like an illusion. Later, David approached him, eyes red. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. For believing her. For not defending you. Harold nodded slowly. Silence can wound as much as cruelty, he said. But you're still my son. That night, Harold walked the hallways. Every room felt lighter, reclaimed. Martha's laughter seemed to echo faintly from the past. The house wasn't haunted anymore. It was home again. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Lydia once mocked him, and smiled. If you don't like living with us, you can leave, she'd said. Those words had been meant to break him. But instead, they saved him. Because Harold didn't just protect his house. He protected his dignity. And in the end, that's what truly makes